while we talk about inclusion, it's definitely a big word, but having 6 distinguished speakers on the panel with just 45 minutes, I think I have to do inclusion of thoughts at a very high speed today, nonetheless. So when we talk about inclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we look at scholarships, we look at policy mandates, we look at opening centers beyond metros. But I think inclusion today has got a more deeper meaning of belongingness for a student. It's about when a first generation learner sitting in a classroom has the confidence to raise his hand or her hand. It's about whether a student or a child living in rural areas have the same level of access to facilities and opportunities as his urban peers, and also whether universities and campuses are building for diversity rather than uniformity. So when we talk about inclusion as our education system expands and grow, one good question that merits discussion is around how institutes are building themselves, or how India is building its institutes to build opportunities which are not selective but are systemic. With that thought, I'll begin with a panel discussion. I'll come to you, Mr. Nayak, first. Sir, how do you think B schools are looking at identifying students in rural underprivileged areas with the right opportunities? What kind of strategies B school should have, or you are having, to ensure such students are not left out?
Thank you. I hope I am audible. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a very, very pertinent question, let me tell you. Inclusive education is the need. And all the educators or educational institutions, irrespective of the size and spread, may it be from schools to the higher education, we need to look at the inclusion of all the students from various backgrounds, right? The inclusion of students go beyond the metros, let me tell you. Today, almost all the educational institutions, they move from metros to different various or other part of the country, right? The rural areas, right? State universities, and the rural local university, local colleges, national and the government and the private universities, tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? This is one. Second, while taking the admissions, we do not take only one point in course, right? We talk about the holistic inclusion of the students, right? Not only from their competitive examination scores, but we facilitate them, thinking about their resilience, their competence level, their interest, their adaptability, right? This is the second part. The third part, to strengthen the inclusion of students from various backgrounds, is the financial inclusions, right? The financial flexibilities, right? At Jaipur School of Business, let me take the example. We have a very, very simplified and yet very robust scholarship policy for all the students from various backgrounds, not only based on their competitive examination scores, but also based on their graduation percentage. Different other criteria are also there. And the third most important part of inclusion of students in various background is that doesn't stop at admission policies or admission rules, but at the classrooms, right? Even before joining the institutions, students from various backgrounds, we try to engage them through different mentoring series, bridge classes, bridge courses, right? And we have a concept called JSB mentoring series, where we invite the leaders from very different sectors to talk them, to engage them, to make them understand what management education is, what higher education is, how do they need to prepare themselves, update themselves before they formally join the institute. So that builds a kind of strong background for each and everyone, so that they do not have fear that whether I should join this particular course or not, right? So I think these 3-4 things makes the inclusive education more robust from various backgrounds. Thank you.
Dr. Kumar, I'll come to you. I wanted to focus more on the curriculum aspect, especially for undergraduate courses.
Yeah.
In the world where we see a lot of social inequalities, social challenges, climate stress, how do you ensure such programs ensure such curricula ensure that the future program leaders, the entrepreneurs, should not face any kind of inequality, especially for people coming from the second tier or third tier towns and cities?
So I'll try and address both of your questions a little bit. When we talk about inclusion, there are two parts to inclusion. One is awareness, the other is accessibility. And at NDIM, we've been affiliated to IP University since the university was founded in 2000. And what we've seen over the last 25 years is, at an earlier stage, awareness used to be the biggest problem. Students beyond a certain circle did not know of the opportunities that were available to them, did not know of the opportunities they could avail. Over time, awareness has become less of a problem. Accessibility has become the major bottleneck, and accessibility, especially you spoke about first generation learners. So accessibility is not just in terms of the financial aspect, which of course is also there. The other part is the aspirational aspect. Students self-disqualify themselves. Yahan to hoga hi nahi. Students think of the logistics of travel, think of the logistics of leaving their parents behind, who will take care of them. All of those things, if I get placed, where am I going to be placed? All of those things. And the other part, that students, there came a point of distrust between higher education in general and the student market, which we were talking about in the previous question with respect to the use of technology in the classroom. Now what has happened is curriculums have slowly, especially with the coming of the NEP, have started moving towards being more inclusive, at least taking steps in that direction. Wherein, at a very rudimentary level, AI is now being included. We have BBA, BCA, PGDM programs. So AI is now being included in the classrooms. Courses like machine learning, giving students access to data. We had to figure out the norms around it. Our teachers would come to us, we've given students a written assignment, they are getting ChatGPT to write it, what should we do? So first we talk about how to educate the students. We had to go back to the drawing board in terms of how to educate our educators to deal with students who were now far more aware, who now knew far more about the world and knew exactly how to get that information. We had to deal with the issue of attendance because students were like, ma'am, aap jo classroom mein sikha rahe ho, that we learned through ChatGPT. We had to sit them down and be like, so we came up with this thing where which we would tell students is ki, please only use ChatGPT for things where you know more than ChatGPT, where your baseline understanding is more than ChatGPT. If you use it as a brainstorming tool, as an idea generation tool, then AI is great. If you use it as the ceiling of your knowledge, that is going to create a problem. You would have students who are coders, who are learning coding in classrooms, but they would face that challenge because they'd be like, ChatGPT wrote the code, it's not working. And then you would need to go back to a person who's actually done it the hard way to explain to the student ki, beta yahan pe aapne gadbad kari hai, this even ChatGPT cannot tell you. With respect to inclusion, there are steps that have happened, and I think everybody will be able to validate that inclusion slowly, gradually, with 2 steps forward, 1 step back, is in general moving in the right direction. In terms of giving students the value for what they deserve so that they can compete, is still a journey, because first all of us will have to re-educate ourselves, then we'll have to make sure everybody down the line gets educated and re-educated around it, and then finally that's going to flow down to the students. So at NDM, that is the journey that we have found ourselves embarking upon, especially post-COVID. Even before ChatGPT came in, we discovered that we had to relearn a lot of things, because students, all of a sudden after COVID, students were like, ye to virtually bhi ho sakta hai. Interviews, company interviews moved entirely online for the large part. Companies started interviewing online. We had to educate students on how to take interviews online. So that learning and relearning process from a curriculum standpoint, from an operational standpoint, is something that has been quite a journey for, I think, for all of us.
Mr. Anand, I'm sure you have a thought to it. For an institution which is largely centered around AI, how do you ensure students which are not from, a technical, discipline, let's say humanitarian, arts, commerce. How do you ensure such students are kind of, also equally empowered, with students who are more technically aligned in your university?
Thank you. Wonderful to be here in Delhi. So I think this is foundational why we set up Universal AI University. We were very clear from the outset. I had been in boardrooms around the world, and for us the big challenge was that some of the best technologists could not communicate the solution, and some of the best communicators could not talk about technology or understand technology. So this was a gap, but this wasn't a leadership gap, this was more a skills gap. And that's where we started. So we said that whether you're learning music, design, liberal arts, psychology, management, anything, we need to have a foundational layer of AI embedded in. So all our students, when they enter the university, whether undergrad or postgrad, they go in through what we call the Super 6 AI subjects. Then they see, how do I use AI in my field? So for example, a student in psychology would be using AI-centered behavioral analytics to determine, or reshape how the entire mental health is being diagnosed. So this is how we said, how can you use AI first? So we said AI is going to be foundational layer. We then questioned the world, right? We looked at the world, and UNESCO came out with a guideline saying that you should not use more than 15% ChatGPT or any LLM in your answers. We flipped the model. We said you have to use minimum 50% of any AI tool, going up to 75%. So we are saying the world is changing at such a dramatic pace that our students need to be ready for that world. They need to be capable, confident to deal with this world. We're talking to industry. We solve problems for industry. And industry is telling us we need AI professionals. And students aren't ready. So we said this needs a complete rethink of education where AI becomes a foundational layer. You learn AI, and then how do you impact music? How does AI impact design? How does AI impact liberal arts? Any subject. Let's look at it from the lens of AI. So we flipped the model, and what that has done for us is that it has made, every time I see a JD from a corporate, a job description, it's surprising, even at an MBA level, now 90% of them are looking for this skill, that skill. These are all AI-related skills. And so we're saying if that's what industry wants, then we've got to rethink the way we were doing education, and of course, build the faculty to be ready for that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabala. I'll come to you, ma'am. Essentially, if we see, it all begins at the school level, and principals shape, school's future, teachers' future. What, according to you, are the top 3, let's say, leadership traits that every principal must have to ensure inclusion is not only accessible, but also embedded in the daily life of a school?
Yeah, I think, Sandeep, thank you for the question, and a good afternoon, very good afternoon to all of you. I think we are taking inclusion is a very different way, and my definition of inclusion would be the neurodivergent population which is there in India and globally. And out of these 7 billion people, just to give you a gist of it, how number of people who are sitting here, we may be neurodivergent in any which way, right? So 1 out of 15 in every, they are neurodivergent, and that's where you have to see the vastness of what inclusion should be for the school principals, for the university professors, or at the level of the jobs also. Now, when I'm talking about this, so I'll stick to the principles because that's where the formative foundation of the students happen. You are arguing about AI in the schools, or maybe the digital gadgets in the school. Sweden, Australia, I can name UK, all of them have stopped social media usage for 16 years of students, irrespective of whether they are normal children or not, coming from the inclusion, this thing. And we are arguing here about whether we should allow our students to get the mobiles or not. Now, spaces are different. Parents take their children differently, but the school is a place where you can build up the formative foundation for the students. And coming from psychology, I would always mention that the psychological milestone development will never change. What Freud said, what Vygotsky said, everything is still there, is cemented in the foundation of every learner. When you talk about ChatGPT, when you talk about Claude, when you talk about Anthropic, they themselves have said this. The founders have said that we don't allow our children to use it. So we are the consumers for it, just to know. Now coming to the principles, I think for me, with my 30 years of experience across the world and in India, I feel a school is as good as the principal believes in it when it comes to inclusion per se. The first thing which you need to have is that whether you as a leader believe in it or not, because policy NEP says that you have to have the infrastructure, you need to have everything, but it is not the responsibility of one psychological counselor to take care of those students who are there. Now, coming to right to education, it says that 25% of them has to be included, so that they may come from socio-economic background, they may come from neurodiversity, and they may also come from the first generation learner which we are talking about. So it's the responsibility of the principal to like kind of put it deep down from the learners to the grade 4 employees that how inclusion has to be not only on paper but also in action, I would say. The second thing which you need to see is that when you are talking, so are you including the parents into that or not? Because when a student is coming for admission to you, so are you really taking care of that? That do you have the facilities for it? And it's not that you have learnt about the PWD Act, which is the Person with Disability Act. I think every one of us should learn it, skim it through, to know that what exactly it means, because maybe your one decision can mar the life of a student. That you are not taking the right decision at that right point of time, screening is not done. So I think that's where the principles, and it is not that you will have 2 days, thought leadership dialogues or 2 days workshops, it will not happen. It has to be 365 days, 24/7. So that's where I'll end it. Thank you.
365 days, 24/7. How does that translate into an online environment? I'll come to you, Dr. Gupta, with a very differentiated model of online schooling. Different children have, different paces of learning capabilities. How do you ensure in an online setup, children with, different needs, different difficulties, neurodiverse, as ma'am said, are catered to with equal level of, understanding, attention, with the children who probably have slightly easy when it comes to, offline environment?
Okay. So there is a lot of misconception related to online schooling. In online schooling, if you start teaching using PPTs and lecture-based method, there will be no inclusion and a lot of children will be left out. So even in a normal school, if you see, there is one teacher and there are 30-40 students. So there is a standard way of teaching and there are like 30-40 different ways of learning. So however good the teacher is, the standard way of teaching may not match with all the 30-40 students. The way of learning might differ. There is a mismatch between style of teaching and the way of learning. Even in a traditional school, like physical classrooms also. So in order to fill this gap, what we do, we implement activity-based learning where concepts are not explained to children. Children do activity and learn on their own. They do and learn. So the teachers act as a facilitators where they facilitate these activities and children learn on their own. They discover the concepts and they discover it on their own at their own pace. So what happens that in this scenario, no child is left out. Every child with different learning pace learns together, understands together, and the learning is higher. Even the retention is higher, and even it helps in development of a lot of critical thinking, which is very important in this time of AI. So because of this way of activity-based learning, which can be implemented better in an online school, Because in a physical school, there are like 40, 50 students, and if 40, 50 students are doing activity, it becomes a commotion in a class, then it leads to a lot of operational difficulties also. But in an online school, each child is sitting at his home with the learning tool. Teacher can just come online, guide the students. Okay, now take out those tools, do this. Did you notice that? So teacher can help to discover the concept. So in this way, like, and even in online school, like in our school, there are like 8 to 10 children in a class. So the teacher can pay individual attention to each child, unlike the traditional school where there are a lot of children. So because of online school, there is no infrastructure cost, we can afford less student. So the impact is more, and like children understand better in this kind of environment than a traditional school, or like if you try explaining them using like, PPTs or whiteboards. So this activity-based learning is like helping us build this, fill this gap and make the student understand better. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. From higher education, management level, I'll come to, preschool level. And we have Sneha Rathore with us. Sneha, as an organized player, in the early education segment, we have Anganwadis, we have preschool chains. As an organized player, how do you ensure that the inclusion between, the rural and urban is bridged successfully, ensuring that students who are living in tier 3, tier 4, probably at village level, this inclusion doesn't become a commodity only for affluent and, urban children. How do you ensure that?
So first of all, good afternoon, everybody. So before answering your question, two things that I would like to say is kudos to Financial Express. So for quite a long time, I've been telling that whenever that we do panel discussion, I've been to so many big conferences in India and outside. It was always preschool panel, K-12 panel, and then higher education. So kudos that finally that people from different spectrum of education are sitting on this panel, are able to discuss and actually look at the gap holistically. And secondly, since we're talking about inclusion, I think nobody more than the early years educators or the early years sector of India understand what inclusion is all about, because we just got included in 2020. So before that, we were never a part of the education structure of our country. So we know what inclusion means, and this was the day that we had been waiting for. Now, as Sandeep said that, so Sanford, just to tell you a little, that Sanford, the brand that I am a CEO of, we have more than 300 branches in India and outside. So that gives us a lot of exposure in terms of understanding the kind of flavors that India has when we reach to the smallest town or the smallest village of the country, and we try to aware them about what early years is all about and why it is important, to the fact that we are running 60 plus branches in Delhi NCR. So we know that what inclusivity is, and how we are working upon is that what is very, very important is that we as educators need to, so one formula cannot fit to all. We are living in a very big country, especially when I talk about India. We are living in a very big country with diverse population, diverse culture, varied languages. So when we try to talk about inclusivity, we have to understand each and every sector, each and every city, and work upon it individually. So that's what we do when we talk about the curriculum also, when we talk about how the curriculum has to be taught. Also working upon the fact that, so I always put this out whenever that we talk about inclusivity, that there needs to be, some spoken hub centers, whereas we are able to, give information, teach the schools which are there in the smaller parts of the country as well. There is so much of free facilities we have. We can get on a Zoom call, we can do so much with, in terms of building the kind of gap that metropolitans or the B grade or the C grade towns have. So I feel to bridge the gap, we need to understand all the sectors and work our curriculum, our teaching methodology around that. And secondly, we need to teach each other. So we as educators and as structured players in private school education, we need to take it as a responsibility to go down to that last mile so that we're able to bridge that gap and we're able to reduce that, that gap and bring more inclusivity. And I'm telling you, so one of the learnings that I had is metropolitan में हमें बहुत challenges आते हैं to bring the parents on one platform and tell them that this is what we are trying to do with your child, or even the teachers, because they're already exposed to so much information. But let me tell you, when we go to the B grade and the C grade towns, they are more excited to learn. They're more excited to adapt to whatever is coming to them. So I feel if they are excited, it brings us as a responsibility to also take that extra mile and go to them and help them enhance their skills, the teacher's skill, and also aware the parents about the importance of education, what is happening in terms of technology and what is happening new around the world with education.
Very interesting. Dr. Naik, I'll come to you again. And I wanted you to touch upon the aspect of experiential and inclusive learning opportunities, for especially for fresh graduates. When we see employees, highlighting critical gaps around, critical thinking, problem-solving approach, communication. So as a B school, how do you see, providing these experiential inclusive learning opportunities, which kind of, strengthen your market relevance for these graduates?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Soni. It's a very, very pertinent question, let me tell you. At higher ed, we deal with the students, those who have already completed their school education and the undergraduate courses, right? And they have already gone through a lot. What we do, we just polish them, we try to hone their skills, we try to impart the qualities in them, right? We call it a 2 years program, but hardly we get 1.5 years to, excel their talent. What I see and what I practice at higher educational institutions, that it is very, very important for students to understand what they learn, whether they are unlearning what they have already learned, whether they are relearning it for the requirement of the industry and the market, whether they are upgrading themselves, right? When we talk about the skills, it is changing every day. When we talk about the markets, the industry, the corporate expectations, their skill requirement is updating, changing every day, where the B school education, the higher ed education, they take time. What I suggest as an educator, that let us bring education in such a way to change from the theoretical perspective to the experiential learning. What skills we brought to the table, what skills the student is learning throughout this 1.5 years, right? Whether it is communication skill, whether it is critical thinking, whether it is problem solving skills, whether it is even the agility and adaptability, which is very important. Today, when we talk to the recruiters, the first point they highlight is that, see, we don't bother about the domain knowledge, right? That may be considered to be 15 to 20% for us. What we expect is the students' agility and adaptability and a growth mindset and open attitude to work with us. For first 6 months, we may give them a kind of training, on the job training, but the student has to be very, very open and ready to learn the skills which is required for today's time, right? Now today, when we talk about the interventions of technology and the AI, the ChatGPT, the contents are everywhere, right? The entire education system is content driven now, content ready now. What we as an educators need to do, especially when I talk about the higher education institutions, particularly in management education, that the teacher, the professor need to handhold, facilitate how to analyze, how to communicate, how to display what content he or she is having at his hand, right? And that too in sync with, in zeal with what the corporate and the industry are expecting, how to deliver it. So the role of educator in these schools is very, very important, made in through the experiential learning, the presentation skills, the team building activities, the interpersonal skills, right? And how to do this. I mean, for this, you need to have a certain kind of innovations also in the classroom, right? Not like the conventional education, you go and talk for 1.5 an hour and you come back. You do not bother whether the students have learned anything or not. So rather than what you do, you engage them, start making the presentations, start taking the presentations, right? And today, most of the organizations, the EdTech organizations, they provide a very, very, skill-based business simulations to the organizations, right? You may start it from IMA, or you go to different EdTechs like Coursera and other platforms. So you engage your students with the real life business simulations to impart the skill, to impart, the required level of technological advancement and how they use, right? I mean, for a particular decision, how the HR perspective, how the financial perspective, how the marketing perspective, even how the IT perspective is being engaged for a student to understand and take it to a different level, take it to a different way.
Absolutely, and I think diversity definitely plays a critical role here, which
can I address that a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. I was coming to you.
In terms of addressing the question of essentially being inclusive and experiential, while at the same time making students industry ready. Yeah. So at an undergraduate level, we went through that churn of trying to figure out, because what has happened now is that company expectations have risen while student skill sets might not necessarily have. And that is, it's a prevalent challenge now. You see all employability reports, it's a big challenge. Companies are saying that students face a challenge in being employable. We figured out 3-4 things that are important. One part is the curriculum. Your students actually have to know what they're talking about. The other part that we figured out is what we've known for hundreds of years is students learn more through learning by doing. Whether it is marketing, whether it is HR, especially now when it comes to IT skills, we learned that students have to step out, have to create something, have to work under somebody, have to go to office at 9 o'clock in the morning, have to come back, have to work late, have to come back, have to occasionally listen to their boss who says, no, your work is not good enough. We realize that is a challenge. Students feel कि नहीं हमें आता है आप कैसे बोल सकते हो. We realized all of those challenges exist. We realized that students, especially who've just stepped out of school and are now, so to speak, in the bigger world, especially students who've come from tier 2, tier 3, they face a challenge in terms of confidence. Some of them face a challenge in terms of communication. And communication is, in my mind, it's given more attention than it's worth. If you are able to communicate confidently and the other person understands you, for most people that's good enough. But it becomes a confidence thing. The fourth biggest thing that we realize is that these students need external mentorship. These students need to meet people who've been on similar paths, who can be very senior, who can be at a mid-level also, but people who can at least guide them ki beta, abhi you do this. Abhi maybe you should focus on this. Abhi your academics are going off in a different direction. So what we did is we onboarded 80 mentors, corporate mentors, to our first year students who just come out of school. We mapped them on a 1:5 ratio. And I'll just share one very small thing in the next 40 seconds. We had mentors who came, and one of the mentors, a very senior guy at Hindustan Zinc, he met with his mentees in the morning, 4 of them, and he calls me up in the evening. He's like, Ayush, I noticed something. One of the students on my mentor panel, she was very shy and she would not communicate in the session. Everybody else was jumping on me, ki sir batao, and she would not communicate. And then I spoke to her separately, and I found out that she is a little bit repressed at home. So she's not encouraged to communicate. So he was like, you take care of it. And I was like, in all these years, my faculty could not notice something. This person who just came with a different mindset has now given me insight that will help me shape that student's life in a better way. So when we talk about being experiential, when we talk about being inclusive, there are actual tangible steps that can be taken which in the long run accumulate and can actually impact a student's lives, because all of us, everybody in this room, healthcare and education are moral responsibilities. It's not just raw material comes in, product goes out. We have a moral responsibility to people who've graduated 20 years, 30 years ago. We continue to have a moral responsibility. So that is just a little bit of my learning that I got over the last few years.
Thanks for answering my question on diversity and inclusion with experiential learning. Anand, I'll come to you. So in a country as diverse as India, AI can often unintentionally reflect or create social biases. How can an institute like yours or new institutions, existing institutions, can embed ethical AI thinking across all its programs to ensure our future leaders know the risks, the pros and cons of it when they work in the real world?
So this is very close to my heart. So, in the 25, 30 years I've been in industry, people aren't afraid of technology per se. They are afraid of being relevant. And once you give them the relevance, the issue dissipates. So we have a structured program where every student has a course on AI ethics and governance. What that tells him is the power of AI, but also the limits that AI puts on it, right? So that they can effectively navigate in this world to be able to make the right decisions for the right people in an inclusive fashion. So I think that is the essence of it. Then we say to our students and our faculty that how can we use AI for good? We have a program where students spend a week in the villages around our campus, and then they have come up with a model. How do we, we give them what they call a bhag, bold, hairy, audacious goal. How can you take 200 million people below the poverty line and bring them outside using AI? And they've come up with a model, right, which is essentially working with the block development officers. So when you empower your students with technology, they become more confident. They can see the relevance of that technology and how it can impact the world, whether it's industry, whether it's government, whether it's society. I think if you can do all of these things, then you're moving away from this entire issue of, what can go wrong. Just a very quick one on, I think the policy makers, if they are in the room, one of the things that has been mooted is that, we might get a call, random call, and it'll sound like a child asking for money or help. And that might be an AI model. Now, we all know we have Truecaller in India. When you know that an incoming sales call is there, you might choose not to use it. So the hope is that the regulators ensure that when we are dealing with AI, we know it's AI. We don't need to be thinking that this might not be a real situation. So if something like Truecaller can be made, that every time I'm interacting in the world of technology, I know I'm speaking to an AI bot, AI agent, then I think I'll be much more wary and careful and be able to avoid some of the pitfalls.
Can I add one point, Sandeep, to AI? I mean, all of us know that change is inevitable, and so as the AI is. Right? We cannot restrain ourselves from AI, using AI. I mean, I was just going through an article a few days back that it has been mentioned that 5 years down the line, or 5 to 7 years down the line, super intelligence is going to take over the artificial intelligence. That's what I was telling in my previous question answer also, that as an educator, we need to make the student to understand how to upskill, because the skill is not going to be constant. Now today it is AI, tomorrow it is going to be SI, and maybe 10 years down the line something else will be there. So every time, every day the student has to upskill, reskill and upskill. And the second part is that when we teach them, that the student needs to understand anything, any technology, any change, whether he is using, it should be used ethically, responsibly, and sustainably, which is going to help the entire society, entire world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Sabharwal, I'll come to you with one critical question around, when we talk about school evaluation and improvement plans. How do you think school leaders, teachers, principals can embed inclusion as a very critical metric?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question, Sandeep. As I mentioned in the earlier this thing also, that it has to percolate down to the level of everybody included in that and every stakeholder when I'm talking about it. Now the first step which a leader or a principal or the management can take it, yes, the infrastructural requirement which are there, and I'm happy to say that most of the schools do have, most of the institutions, specifically educational institutions under the leadership of today's government has actually had this. I mean, the infrastructure is perfect in most of the things, barring few the old buildings where we cannot do much, but yes. Now, in an institution, when you have everything ready, I think what you need to see is, are you actually, when you are advertising about your admission process, are you reaching out to the community which is not on the social media? That's one thing, because if you really want to have those 25% inclusion where the students, and it is not about how are you going to navigate it? It is all about that, are you ready to do that as a leader first? Because I think when it started, the 25% inclusion, so there were a lot of debate happened around the corner, every corner of the world, that how will they adjust into the thing. But you have to understand, we are talking about only the inclusion which is socio-economic. Now this Gen Z which is coming, they are confused about their gender identity also. So they tell you that, okay, don't call me she, he, they, ze, whatever. But that's where, and how many of you are actually moving forward? Now, using ChatGPT is one thing, but is your thinking also changing? And are you dealing? Because there's a huge gap in that. So if the leadership is not ready to answer these questions, I think somewhere we will fail. And we are talking about 250 million children here who are into that age group. So that's where we have to first learn ourselves and unlearn certain things, that these students who are coming, they may come from different backgrounds, but they are little aware, more aware about their rights as well. Now, second thing which we have to do is at the teachers level, that it is not a, most of the time I see in schools that they are talking about, okay, there will be a special teacher who's teaching, who's going to teach them. No, it has to be universal design of learning, which UNICEF talks about, which WHO talks about, that every teacher, every person has to be empowered with the right skills to handle these students. Because I'm not going to have, let's say I have a student who's having autism. Now, autism comes on a different spectrum. Now, am I going to involve them into the jobs? Are they going to study in these business schools which we are talking about? Are we ready to train them or not? Because you have to see, when we are talking, this whole conversation is about from school to campus, but I would say earlier to campus. So that's where we have to see that, are we really doing the work for that? So it's for the teachers, it has to be universal design of learning. And the third point is the parents, which are the, as she mentioned, Sneha mentioned about it, and it's a challenge for most of us as educators, if you will see, to make parents ready to understand that the child is having some deficit. They don't agree. Tare Zameen Par happened once, but still I see a lot of students and parents who are not ready to accept that no ma'am, I don't want any accommodation. It's not about the accommodation. And accommodation, I'm talking about the exam accommodation, not the living accommodation. Now, when you are not ready, so we have to do that three side work as a leader, as a social responsible citizen, and that's where I think we need to work together. And thank you for having this conversation here, because I've attended 3 conferences internationally, and I had a conversation. There were some people who came into that this exhibition and conference, that they said, ma'am, there is nothing for the special need children or the inclusion. And just to give you an idea, if you are into AI, if you are having some kind of a product or services in AI, it is almost a $52 billion revenue which can be generated with this neurodiverse children. It's not about a business idea, it's all about that are we really creating that kind of a ecosystem that will help us in empowering everybody, including from the lower socioeconomic or the higher economic status. So I'll rest my case here. Thank you.
Very beautifully put in words. So Gupta, cost is also, another important aspect, for most of the families in India, especially those which are slightly underprivileged. According to you, does cost limit inclusion? Because while online education can reduce, overall costs, but fees can still be a challenge for those who are probably from a less privileged background.
So this is important, like the cost factor. Online, when you teach one-to-one, like one-to-one children, then it's a limitation. But we also teach children in the rural background. Like in the rural areas also we teach. And how we do that is like, we set up screens in the rural areas and we teach them online. So the rural areas where there is a issue of quality of education, the good teachers are scarce. So we are able to reach them online through setting up screens in these rural areas, and we conduct classes, and like children in a group of 30-40, they can attend those classes, and classes are conducted from Delhi, Bombay, anywhere. Like teachers can be any geography, and they conduct classes in the rural areas. So children in the rural areas are able to get world-class education in this way. And like, when it comes to education materials and screens and all, there are, we have some donors who donate the screens, and like our materials are sent to these rural areas, and where we teach, like we are implementing experiential learning in rural areas through this. And like we are able, the classes are taken by world-class teachers, and even the cost is so low that even in rural areas, very background, like, we are doing this in Jharkhand, Bihar, all these areas where like, quality school is a dream. But by this method, like, this online teaching, we are able to reach this very areas where like, quality education was not thought of before.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. While time is up, but I have one last question for Sneha. Sneha, these edtech tools, that we talk about, AI-based learning, which has also come into early childhood education. How do you think these, these technologies can kind of accelerate, learning for kids rather than replacing, human interaction?
So, to be honest, it is up to us. I don't think AI is going to replace humans anyways if we are able to adapt to it, and we are able to skill our teachers, or if we are able to skill the technology to actually use the AI in the right fashion. And I feel, as somebody who's a very proponent of implementing technology, I think technology makes so many things easier for us, and it also, one important thing that I feel, it really, really helps in inclusivity. So, for example, just one or two examples that I would like to mention. As we said, that it is very difficult for us that in our community, in Sanford, we have close to 5,000 teachers, and to really bring them together, this could only be done through technology. So, I feel that, and also more than that, so through technology, we're not only skilling them, we're also assessing them, we're also helping them. They're always able to get back to us. Secondly, I feel for the children, it is a generation which is all technology driven, so you can't take away technology from them. You can't say that, we don't want to give technology in the schools. Of course, it should be restricted, but it should be introduced even in the early years, maybe through interactive panels or little technology like ARs and all of those things, which actually help them stimulate in the right fashion, and the time should be restricted. Thirdly, I feel technology or AI is really, really helpful in bringing parents together as a community. So we used to have a huge problem in terms of parents' participation in the school. So we started doing very small stuff that every week the parents get an activity to do at home with their child through our apps, through our tutorials, and then they have to record it and upload that activity on our dashboard, and also write a feedback, what did they experience with their child doing this activity and how this activity helped their child or their bond with their child. So I feel that technology, if used in the right fashion, it could be a great, great, great support system, and it could take us to great miles as well.
Thank you so much. They say padhega India, tab badhega India. I think it should be inclusively padhega India, tabhi to exponentially badhega India.